There are nights when a person's heart goes strangely quiet, not because the love inside them has faded, but because it is sitting in silence, hoping it will not be misunderstood. The outside world grows still, conversations come to an end, distractions disappear, and for the first time all day, there is nothing left to compete with the thoughts that have been patiently waiting in the background. In those quiet hours, the heart often begins speaking a language that words cannot easily translate. It is a peculiar kind of silence. It is not empty, nor is it cold. It is filled with questions that have no simple answers, emotions that feel too delicate to expose, and fears that seem impossible to explain without risking even greater misunderstanding. The person may replay conversations over and over, wondering whether they revealed too much or too little. They may remember moments of closeness with warmth, only to immediately wonder whether those moments meant the same thing to the other person. Every memory becomes both a comfort and a source of uncertainty. There are thoughts that never leave the safety of the mind because they seem too vulnerable to survive the journey into spoken words. Will they still understand me if they see this side of me? Will honesty bring us closer, or will it create distance? If I admit how deeply I care, will I lose the very connection I am trying to protect? These questions linger in silence, not because they lack importance, but because they carry the weight of everything the heart hopes not to lose. Sometimes the quietness is mistaken for emotional withdrawal. From the outside, it may appear as though the person has become distant or indifferent, yet beneath that calm surface, their emotions may be more active than ever. They are carefully choosing which feelings to reveal and which to keep hidden, not out of deception, but out of uncertainty. They fear that one misunderstood sentence could overshadow everything they truly feel. This is one of the quiet paradoxes of human connection. The people who feel the deepest emotions are not always the ones who express them most easily. For some, love creates openness. For others, it awakens caution. The closer someone becomes to another person, the more there is to lose, and the awareness of that possibility can make even sincere affection retreat into silence. During these late-night hours, memories often become louder than reality. Small gestures are revisited with extraordinary detail. A smile, a shared laugh, a meaningful glance, a brief pause in conversation. The mind searches these moments for reassurance, trying to determine whether the bond is still as strong as it once seemed. At the same time, old disappointments and past emotional wounds quietly whisper reminders of previous heartbreaks, encouraging caution where trust longs to grow. That internal dialogue can be exhausting. One part of the heart wants to reach out, to speak honestly, to remove every wall standing between two people. Another part insists on waiting, observing, protecting itself from the possibility of being misunderstood. Neither voice is driven by a lack of care. Both are trying, in their own way, to preserve something deeply valuable. Perhaps this is why silence can be so deceptive. It often appears empty when, in truth, it is overflowing with emotion. It is filled with unsent messages, unfinished conversations, quiet hopes, and carefully guarded fears. It contains affection that has not found the right words, concern that has not discovered the right moment, and vulnerability that is waiting for a space where it feels safe enough to be seen without judgment. Understanding this changes the way we interpret quietness in the people we love. Not every silence is a goodbye. Not every pause is evidence that feelings have disappeared. Sometimes silence is simply the heart gathering the courage to speak without the fear of being misunderstood. And sometimes, behind the calmest expression, there exists a depth of love that is patiently waiting for the moment when it no longer feels necessary to hide. And if you're reading this tonight, maybe part of you is worn out from acting like you've stopped caring, while another part of you is still quietly hoping someone out there is holding on to you just as hard as you're holding on to them. Because here's the truth, someone probably loves you more than you realize. Not in the big cinematic way movies love to show us, not through perfect timing or the right words said at the right moment, but through hesitation, through emotional messiness, through distance that's really fear wearing a disguise, not indifference. Before you let yourself walk away for good, there's something worth understanding, something most people only figure out once it's too late. A heart doesn't necessarily stop loving you just because it's gone quiet. Sometimes that silence is nothing more than a scared soul's last line of defense, protecting a feeling it can't fully put into words. People are strange creatures when it comes to love, especially once it starts to feel real. We spend most of our lives saying we want deep connection, real intimacy, someone who truly gets us. But the second someone actually reaches those buried parts of us, something in us flinches. Carl Jung talked about the unconscious as this vast hidden ocean underneath everything we do. And when someone genuinely falls for you, they're not just responding to your surface-level self, your jokes, your style, your habits. Without meaning to, they stir up everything you've tucked away underneath. Your insecurities, the needs you never got met, the loneliness you carry, that quiet hope of being chosen without having to earn it. That kind of connection rearranges people from the inside. It rattles them. It drags old wounds back into the light. Wounds they thought they'd buried for good. This is exactly why a person can love you deeply and still pull back at the very moment you need them to hold on tighter. It sounds backwards, but psychologically it tracks. Love isn't only warmth and comfort. Love is exposure. Love means standing there stripped down emotionally, hoping the other person won't take advantage of how soft you've become. And a lot of people were never taught how to handle that kind of closeness. They learned how to survive being let down. They learned how to look tough. They learned how to bottle things up. Nobody taught them how to actually let love in without flinching. So when this person started catching real feelings for you, something shifted in them that they probably can't fully explain, even to themselves. Suddenly, your mood affected theirs. Your silence started to sting. Your attention became something that calmed them down. Your absence hit harder than they expected it to. And that scared them, because the moment someone else has that kind of power over your inner world, some part of your brain flags it as dangerous. Losing them starts to feel possible. Abandonment becomes a real fear again. That independence you worked so hard to protect suddenly feels shaky. A lot of people mix up emotional distance with a lack of love, but often it's the opposite. Distance can be a sign of someone being completely overwhelmed by how much they feel. Some people go cold because they genuinely don't care. Others go quiet because they care more than they know what to do with. That second type is much harder to read because what they do doesn't match what they feel. Their heart is pulling them toward you while their fear is dragging them the other way. Part of them wants to get closer. Another part is whispering, "What if this falls apart the same way everything else did?" And without even realizing it, they start guarding themselves against pain that hasn't even happened yet. Maybe you felt this exact contradiction yourself. That strange back and forth, the warmth followed by radio silence, the way they look at you when they think you're not watching, the small details about you they somehow remember without even trying, that charge in the air even during the most ordinary conversation. And still, something feels stuck, unfinished, like their soul keeps leaning your way while their mind keeps backing off. This is what unhealed emotional wounds often look like. People picture trauma as some big dramatic event, but most emotional wounds are much quieter than that. They live inside attachment patterns, inside a fear of being vulnerable, inside the instinct to withdraw. Some people shut down emotionally the moment they start caring because closeness unconsciously drags up old pain they never actually dealt with. Maybe they loved someone who left. Maybe as a kid they learned that showing emotion got them rejected. Maybe being vulnerable once humiliated them so badly that their nervous system now treats closeness like a threat. And the hard part is, they might not even understand why they're behaving this way. The subconscious runs way more of our behavior than we like to admit. Someone can genuinely love you and still sabotage the connection at the same time, simply because their nervous system has wired love together with danger. They want to be close to you, but closeness sets off their alarm bells. They crave intimacy, but intimacy stirs up vulnerability they're not ready for. So they end up sending you mixed signals without even meaning to. This is exactly why mature love takes patience more than it takes passion. Passion is the easy part. Anyone can want someone intensely for a little while, but real love asks for something much harder. It asks people to take off their armor piece by piece. It asks them to trust again after they've been burned. It asks them to stay open even when things are uncertain. And for a lot of people, that feels terrifying because they've spent years building an identity around protecting themselves emotionally. You also have to understand something about silence. It isn't always empty. Sometimes it's someone processing everything quietly underneath the surface. Some people talk through their feelings right away. Others go inward when things get too intense. They retreat into their own head, into confusion, into internal arguments with themselves, especially people who've spent their whole lives suppressing how they feel. Their silence isn't always meant as punishment. Sometimes it's just how they survive. But this is exactly where relationships go sideways. One person reads silence as rejection, while the other one is experiencing it as self-protection. One feels abandoned, the other feels completely overwhelmed. And slowly, two people who genuinely care about each other start to drift. Not because the love died, but because fear got louder than communication. This is where a lot of people give up too soon. They confuse emotional complexity for a lack of love. They assume love is supposed to look easy and obvious all the time. But the deepest connections are rarely simple. They dig into the most guarded parts of who we are. They force us to face our shadow self, all the insecure, wounded, scared parts we usually hide behind confidence. Jung believed real love often works like a mirror, not just a source of comfort, but a reflection of everything in us that's still unresolved. That's why certain connections feel almost spiritually heavy. They trigger a kind of awakening. They show you patterns you never noticed in yourself before. Your fear of being left, your habit of giving too much, your fear of not being worthy, your need for reassurance, your hidden loneliness. And suddenly, this other person, without even trying, is tangled up in parts of your identity you didn't even realize were still hurting. This person might be dealing with the exact same chaos right now. Lying awake, replaying your conversations, acting completely normal during the day while falling apart a little on the inside. Fighting the urge to text you because their pride keeps getting in the way, missing you badly while convincing themselves the distance is necessary. And maybe the saddest part of all this is that people often hurt the ones they love most simply because those are the only people who actually have the power to hurt them. Once you start looking at people through this kind of psychological lens instead of a purely emotional one, everything changes. You stop reading every confusing behavior as proof they don't love you. You start noticing the defense mechanisms underneath it all, the slow replies, the inconsistency, the way they pull back right after getting close, the fear tucked inside their restraint. None of it is healthy left unaddressed, but all of it is very, very human. And maybe this is the hard truth your heart needed today. Not everyone who seems emotionally distant is actually emotionally empty. Some people are just worn down from carrying a guarded heart through life. There are people walking around with years of quiet grief nobody ever noticed. People who learned to look independent because depending on someone once wrecked them. People who secretly crave affection but panic the moment they actually get it consistently. People who forgot how to trust calm, steady love because chaos is what felt familiar growing up. If this person genuinely loves you, the battle happening inside them might be far bigger than anything you can see from the outside. But there's another side to this you shouldn't ignore either. Love by itself isn't enough without growth. You can't rescue someone from their own unconscious patterns if they refuse to look at themselves honestly. You can't keep sacrificing your own well-being, hoping your love alone will fix someone else's fear. Real connection needs both people to take responsibility. Compassion matters, absolutely, but so does respecting yourself. Understanding someone's wounds should never mean abandoning your own needs completely. This is where emotional maturity comes in. Mature love doesn't beg for leftovers. It doesn't destroy itself trying to earn its place. It doesn't chase endlessly at the cost of its own dignity. Mature love knows how to be patient without losing itself. It gives space without disappearing. It stays compassionate without giving up its boundaries. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do isn't to force the connection, but to give someone room to actually face themselves, because real change can't be forced from outside. People only shift when they get tired enough of repeating the same cycle. Maybe this connection came into your life not just to give you love, but to wake something up in you psychologically, to teach you the difference between attachment and actual emotional alignment, to show you how badly you crave being met halfway, to push you to stop ignoring your own gut instincts out of fear of losing someone. Think about it honestly. Has your intuition ever whispered the truth long before your mind was ready to accept it? Have you sensed feelings underneath their words before they ever said anything? People are far more intuitive than they give themselves credit for. The subconscious is constantly reading emotional energy, body language, shifts in tone, patterns in silence, eye contact, the tension in a room. Long before logic catches up, some part of you already knows. That's why certain people stay unforgettable, not because they were flawless, but because they woke something up inside you that had been sleeping. And waking up is rarely comfortable. Sometimes it comes through longing, through confusion, through the kind of distance that forces you to sit with yourself, through missing someone so much that you finally face a loneliness you'd been avoiding. Pain has a strange way of stripping away illusions. It exposes the truth. It shows you exactly where the healing still needs to happen. That's why some relationships completely reshape you internally, even if they never become stable on the outside. They force growth. They force awareness. Maybe this person is standing right at the edge of that same transformation right now. Maybe they're starting to realize that avoiding their feelings doesn't protect them the way it used to. Maybe your absence is forcing them to sit with feelings they've been avoiding. Maybe they're beginning to understand that real love can't survive forever behind silence and pride. Because eventually, everyone reaches a point where loneliness starts weighing more than vulnerability does. And when that moment comes, people start to change. Not overnight, not perfectly, but slowly. They start noticing the walls they built. They start seeing how much fear has been steering their choices. They start realizing how many real connections they sabotage trying to protect themselves from getting hurt. And for the first time, they understand that you can't have emotional safety without emotional openness. That kind of realization changes everything. But while they're going through their own awakening, you have to keep going through yours too. Don't let uncertainty chip away at your sense of self-worth. Don't let someone else's confusion convince you that you're somehow hard to love. How someone responds to closeness usually says more about their relationship with themselves than it does about your value as a person. Sit with that for a second. A lot of emotionally unavailable people aren't withholding love because you're not enough. They're withholding because they're terrified. Terrified of needing someone. Terrified of depending on another person. Terrified of rejection. Terrified of losing control. Terrified of being truly seen. And ironically, the deeper they love, the more exposed they feel. That creates this internal tug of war. They want closeness while resisting it at the same time. And unless they actually do the work to heal, they'll stay stuck between wanting and fearing. But you can't carry that weight for both of you. You can love someone deeply and still choose your own emotional balance. You can understand someone on a psychological level without excusing constant inconsistency. Compassion should never turn into self-destruction. This is one of the biggest lessons emotionally aware people eventually learn. Love is supposed to expand you, not slowly wear you down. And even with all this complexity, some connections really are worth fighting for. The rare ones where two people slowly learn each other's fears with tenderness instead of judgment, where the walls come down gradually over time, where both people choose to heal instead of feeding their egos. These relationships do exist, but they take honesty, accountability, vulnerability, patience, and real emotional courage. Because at the end of the day, every relationship eventually turns into a confrontation with yourself. You can't fully love someone else while staying completely disconnected from your own truth. That's why doing the inner work matters. It's not just some spiritual buzzword. Practically speaking, it means facing the parts of yourself you'd rather not look at, the jealousy you deny, the fear you hide, the loneliness you distract yourself from, the patterns you keep repeating without realizing it. The wounds you tell yourself don't bother you anymore. Until people actually face those hidden layers, relationships keep repeating the same pain in slightly different packaging. Maybe this person is finally starting to face themselves because of you. Maybe your love became too real to keep ignoring, too honest, too awakening. And even if they haven't fully sorted themselves out yet, some part of them already knows this connection matters. People don't struggle this hard emotionally over someone who means nothing to them. Real inner conflict only shows up where real attachment exists. That's why indifference feels flat and simple, while love feels messy and alive. When someone truly doesn't care, their energy is just flat. But when someone loves you deeply while wrestling with fear, their energy comes across as inconsistent, charged, intense. You feel the conflict in them, even when they're not saying a word. You've probably already sensed all of this. The pull, that unfinished feeling. The quiet knowing that something real exists underneath all the silence. And maybe you've questioned yourself over and over because of it, wondering if you're just imagining it all. But deep intuition doesn't usually show up for no reason. The subconscious is constantly picking up on emotional truths hiding under the surface. Still, intuition needs to be paired with wisdom. Don't romanticize your own suffering. Don't get hooked on emotional uncertainty just because intensity feels meaningful. Some people stay stuck in painful patterns because unpredictability becomes almost addictive. Your nervous system can actually get attached to those highs and lows. Calm, steady love can feel unfamiliar, even boring, after you've gotten used to chaos. This is why healing changes what you're drawn to. Emotionally healed people stop chasing confusion just to feel something. They start valuing consistency, safety, honesty, and peace. They stop mistaking emotional unavailability for depth. They stop trying to earn love through suffering. And maybe this whole experience is slowly nudging you toward that same realization, because sometimes life doesn't send someone into your world just to complete you. Sometimes it sends them to change you, to raise your standards, to sharpen your emotional awareness, to teach you that you deserve real reciprocity, not endless guessing games. At the same time, transformation takes time for everyone involved. If this person really loves you, they might be fighting battles right now that nobody else can see. Battles between old wounds and new hope, between fear and desire, between self-protection and finally letting themselves be vulnerable. And maybe right now, they're somewhere alone, replaying your voice in their head, wondering if it's too late to reach out honestly. People tend to carry regret far heavier than rejection. A lot of people would rather avoid being vulnerable for a while than risk losing someone completely until the day they realize their own silence is exactly what cost them that person. Don't underestimate how deeply people can feel things they struggle to say out loud. Some of the deepest love stories are hidden behind guarded behavior, not because guarding yourself is a good thing, but because people are imperfect, doing their best to survive their own history while still hoping to be fully loved anyway. That's what makes love both beautiful and a little tragic. Two flawed people trying to trust each other while carrying invisible scars. Two nervous systems shaped by completely different pain. Two inner children quietly asking the same question. Will you still stay if you really see me? Maybe that's the real question sitting at the center of this connection too. Because underneath the pride, the silence, the fear, the confusion, there's usually just a person who's scared they won't be enough for the one they care about. Most people won't admit this out loud, but a lot of emotionally distant people secretly believe they'll eventually let the people they love down, so they create distance before rejection can happen on its own. It's a subconscious form of self-protection. If I keep my guard up, losing them will hurt less. But love doesn't actually work like that. Guarded love still hurts. Silent love still aches. Bottled up feelings still leave scars. And eventually, a person gets exhausted carrying emotions they never let themselves express honestly. This is why emotional honesty matters so much. Not performance, not manipulation, not neediness dressed up as romance, but real honesty. The kind that says, I'm scared, but I care. I struggle with this, but you matter to me. I don't fully understand myself yet, but the thought of losing you is unbearable. Those are the moments that actually change relationships for good. And if this person ever reaches that point, everything between you could shift. But until then, your job isn't to lose yourself while you wait. Keep healing. Keep growing. Keep becoming whole, regardless of how things turn out. Your worth doesn't shrink just because someone else is struggling internally. You are not hard to love. You are not too much. Wanting clarity, consistency, and real presence isn't unrealistic. Don't let emotionally guarded people convince you your needs are excessive just because those needs make them uncomfortable. Healthy love won't always be flawless, but it should still feel safe enough to breathe in. And one day, whether it's with this person or with someone else who matches your emotional depth, you'll find a connection that doesn't require constant decoding. One where affection isn't hidden behind fear anymore. One built on honesty instead of silence. One where both people stop pretending they're unaffected by each other. But maybe before that future shows up, this current connection still has something left to teach you both. Maybe it's reconciliation. Maybe it's closure. Maybe it's an awakening. Maybe it's courage. Only time will tell which one it is. Still, don't ignore the quiet truth your heart might already know. Somebody out there genuinely loves you. Not in some shallow, temporary, casual way, but deeply, quietly, imperfectly, and genuinely. And before you give up completely, understand that people sometimes need time before they're emotionally ready for the love they already feel inside. Healing rarely happens on a clean timeline. Emotional growth rarely arrives all at once. A lot of people only become emotionally mature after they've come close to losing what mattered most. That's the tragedy of growing as a person, but also its quiet beauty, because sometimes right when hope feels used up, people finally get honest with themselves. And maybe, just maybe, this story isn't ending the way your fear keeps telling you it will. Maybe this silence isn't love dying. Maybe it's the hard, uncomfortable stretch right before real honesty finally breaks through. So tonight, before you convince yourself you were never really loved, hold on to this. Not everyone who seems distant has forgotten you. Some people are just fighting a quiet war between love and fear. And if your heart still feels tied to theirs in a way you can't fully explain with logic, maybe that feeling means something. Maybe underneath all the confusion, two people are still trying to find the courage to finally show up honestly for each other. Until then, protect your peace, but don't let your heart turn cold. Stay emotionally wise without becoming emotionally guarded, because the people who keep believing in love, even after disappointment, are often the ones who end up experiencing it most fully. And maybe one day you'll look back on this hard chapter, not as the moment love disappeared, but as the moment two wounded people slowly learned how to stop running from it.